Marisol Rivera ran Rosie's Bakery with a quiet sense of pride, the kind of pride that came from knowing her customers by name, their orders by heart, and her own hands well practiced in the art of baking. Each morning, as the town of Santa Isabel stirred to life, she opened the bakery's small wooden door at 5:30 a.m., the bell above it chiming softly. She moved with purpose, checking the ovens, wiping down the counters, and preparing for the first rush of the morning. But as much as she loved the rhythm of her work, it was the man on the bench outside who had captured her attention. Ignacio Torres was a fixture in the town, a quiet, solitary figure who always arrived at the bakery precisely at 6:10 a.m. He never said a word, never asked for anything special, and simply sat on the bench with his weathered coat and a gaze that seemed to look through the bakery windows and into the distance. At first, Marisol hadn't thought much of it. People came and went all the time, and he was just another regular in her daily routine. But over time, something about him tugged at her heart. There was a weariness to his presence, a sense of loss, and a quiet sorrow that lingered in his eyes. It reminded her of her own mother's worn-out spirit in the years before her death. A woman who had always given, always shared, no matter how little she had. So, one morning, after wrapping up the final batch of croissants, Marisol placed a paper bag with a warm roll, a muffin, and a cup of coffee on the bench outside. She didn't think much of it at the time, just a small act of kindness to a man who seemed to have no one. But the next day, he was there again, waiting as usual. And when she checked, the bag was gone. For nearly 2 months, this became their unspoken ritual. Every morning at 6:10, Marisol would prepare a simple breakfast, wrapped in a brown paper bag, and place it on the bench outside. And every morning, Ignacio would sit there, his eyes on the horizon, and silently accept the gift, without so much as a word of thanks. Marisol didn't mind. She knew he didn't need to say anything. She didn't need recognition, only the satisfaction of knowing she had helped, but not everyone shared her view. As the weeks passed, rumors began to spread around town. Some customers whispered that Marisol was running a charity under the guise of a bakery, while others accused her of trying to manipulate people into thinking she was a saint. Gustavo, the bakery's gruff owner, pulled her aside one afternoon. "Look, I'm not telling you to stop," he said, rubbing his forehead. "But don't make it obvious. If you're going to leave food out, just do it in the back. Don't make it so public." Marisol nodded, her heart sinking. She didn't want attention for this. It wasn't about that. It was just something she did, something her mother had done, a small way of making the world a little less lonely for someone. But now it felt like the kindness had been twisted into something else entirely. For days, the routine continued. Marisol would wake up early, bake her pastries, and prepare a simple breakfast for Ignacio. She would leave the bag on the bench outside and watch from the window as he took it without a word. Sometimes he would sit there for hours, staring out at the quiet street, his face as unreadable as ever. But one day, something shifted. The bench sat empty. At first, Marisol assumed he was just running late. She didn't think much of it. He had skipped a few days here and there before. But as the morning wore on and still no sign of him appeared, her concern deepened. She couldn't shake the nagging feeling in her chest. The next day, the bench was empty again. And the day after that. By now, Marisol had already made the breakfast, prepared the coffee, and wrapped the food in its usual brown paper bag. She didn't know what had happened to him, but she couldn't bring herself to throw it away. She placed it in the fridge and went about her work, the absence of Ignacio now hanging in the air like an unanswered question. "Where's the old man?" Rosa, the woman who ran the flower shop across the street, asked one afternoon. "He's been gone a few days now?" Marisol forced a smile, though the question unsettled her. "I'm sure he's just taking a break." Rosa didn't buy it. That man has never taken a break in his life. Marisol couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, but she kept the worry to herself. Days passed, then weeks. The bench outside the bakery remained empty, and no one had seen Ignacio. The rumors, too, started to swirl again. Only this time, they weren't about Marisol's charity work. They were about Ignacio and why he had suddenly disappeared. Some said he had moved away. Others said he had died. but no one knew for sure. Every morning, Marisol continued her routine. She still woke up early, still baked the rolls, and still made the coffee. But the ritual was different now. The bench sat empty, and she couldn't help but wonder if she would ever see him again. 10 days passed without a sign of Ignacio. Marisol tried to ignore the growing sense of unease. She had a bakery to run, after all, and a job to do. But the questions kept circling in her mind like vultures, picking at her thoughts. That night, as she sat in her small apartment above the bakery, she pulled out her phone and checked her notifications. A message from Rosa popped up. "Check this out," Rosa wrote, attaching a link. Marisol clicked on the link, not sure what to expect. It led to a Facebook post with a photo of the bakery, her bakery, with the bench outside and the paper bag. She used to leave for Ignacio. The caption was biting. Roz's bakery now feeding imaginary customers. Guess good PR is more important than good sense. The comments were worse. Marketing stunt. Bet. She says it's for underprivileged folks and just tosses it. Feeding strays only creates more of them. Some people really need a reality check. Marisol stared at the screen, her heart sinking. The post had gone viral, and the comments were filled with judgment and ridicule. The kindness she had given so freely, so quietly, had been reduced to a cruel joke. She closed the app, her hands shaking. She couldn't bear to read more. But the damage had been done. The next morning, as Marisol wiped down the pastry case, the sharp sound of tires crunching on gravel caught her attention. She glanced up to see 4 military SUVs pulling up in front of the bakery. The vehicles were matte black and spotless, the kind of vehicles you only saw in movies. As they parked in perfect alignment, Marisol's stomach churned. This wasn't just a coincidence. She could feel it. The doors of the SUVs opened one by one, and uniformed soldiers stepped out in perfect sync. Their movements were crisp, rehearsed, each man a picture of discipline. And then, from the lead vehicle, a tall man stepped out. His uniform was immaculate, adorned with medals and ribbons. He moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the bakery. As he walked toward the door, the bell above the door chimed as he entered, the sound unusually loud in the heavy silence of the room. The soldiers remained outside, standing at attention. The man approached the counter. "Is there a Marisol Rivera here?" His voice was calm but firm. Marisol froze, her breath catching in her throat. She stepped forward, unsure of what to say. "Yes," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The man took a step closer, his eyes steady but sympathetic. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel David Santos, United States Army Special Forces. I'm here because of a promise." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, thick and official-looking, sealed with care. "This letter is from Ignacio Torres," he said. Marisol's heart stopped. Ignacio. The man she had been quietly helping for so long. The man who had disappeared without a trace. The letter from Ignacio, delivered by Colonel Santos, was simple yet profound. It revealed that Ignacio had been the father of Sergeant Mateo Torres, one of the best soldiers the colonel had ever known. Mateo had died in action months ago, and after his death, Ignacio had disappeared. Before he passed away from heart failure, Ignacio had written a letter to Santos, not about his grief or his son's death, but about Marisol, the woman in the red apron who had fed him each morning without question, without pity. In his final words, Ignacio had told Santos, "Tell her she helped a father believe the world still had kindness left for the broken."